Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of The Bullet. My name is Paul Lathrop. I am the Deputy Director of New Media for the Second Amendment Foundation. Normally on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays I do this alone. However, my first story I have today is written by a good friend, and you know him, he's been here a ton, Rob Morse, Self-Defense Gun Stories. He also helps me out when we do Polite Society podcast, and I thought I would bring Rob along and we would talk about his article and honestly some other news of the day. Rob, as I get social media hooked up here, let's just get started. I want to talk to you about an article you wrote that I saw today. Should we stay or should we go? How should we stop evil? You want to just nutshell that article a little bit and tell us a little bit about that article, and then I'm going to go off on my take on it.
Okay. This came from a class that I recently observed. A bunch of school staff in central Colorado, I'll have to call them pretty dialed in. This was their fourth class, so it had been at least 3 years that they'd been carrying in schools. The way that class was set up, in the second day, they said, this is serious. You hear gunshots, you're going toward a murderer. And I thought, wow, that's professional level. That's the sort of speech you have with SWAT officers. And then I went, well, wait a minute. Are they professional, or are they really amateurs just like us? Only they're performing to a higher standard. And the answer is yes, a little bit of both. They're in between. They're not professionals who, train once a week. Really, SWAT officers might be training constantly in some large police departments. But some of the problems that they face are exactly what we face. Everybody wonders what to do. Should I try and escape? Should I stay here, close the door, and defend myself where I am? Should I advance because there are people behind me I need to defend? So asking those questions, whether you're defending kids in school or your family at home, I thought that would be pretty helpful.
I love the article, and what I'm going to say for those of you who, by the way, we've got already a couple check-ins. Tom Walls, who does Training Friday with me, is here, as well as C&T Designs and Arms. Coop's checking in. But I'll just get that one up here quick. There we go.
C&T, my phone number. I didn't change my phone number.
Don't call him now.
Not now. Oops. Yeah, let me kill that.
But anyway, and I just silenced mine. What I'm going to say to that is, should an emergency happen, no matter where you are, what you're going to do is you're going to default to your training and your practice. If you've had no training and no practice, you're not going to be effective no matter what you do.
Paul, let me add to that, because unfortunately a lot of us are walking around with what we think is training and practice, which we got from Hollywood. And that's really bad practice in every sense of the word.
You are not John Wick. Neither of us are John Wick.
Neither of us, and we've taken a lot of training compared to the average guy, which is kind of a shame. Come on, let's up those numbers. But here, can I walk through some of the scenarios here, Paul?
Yes, please.
Because this is every parent, you're at home. You hear breaking glass. If you're there alone, what's the safest thing to do? Lock the door. If you've got kids in the room next door to you, what do?
Go to the
kids.
You
get between them. What?
You go to the kids.
Right. You get between them and the problem.
Yes.
And so in both cases, you're asking yourself, what's the safest thing to do in this situation? And at 2 a.m, when you hear breaking glass, it's really great to have a go-to rather than have to spend another minute waking up to sort it out. because you might not have a minute.
Yeah, and the other, I'm gonna take this opportunity to go just a little bit left field.
Okay.
And I'm gonna say, for people that they're these go-getters, they're high energy people, and they get 3 to 4 hours of sleep a night. When you get those 3 to 4 hours sleep, that's very heavy, very deep sleep. That's very hard to climb out of. If you're not getting if you get 8 hours of sleep every night, if you're interrupted, no big deal. You catch up quickly. If you're in this deep recovery sleep, it's hard to come out of that.
Paul, you're a professional in that regard. Hear me out. I'm not as crazy as it sounds. Aren't there requirements that as a truck driver, you had to get so much rest, and then some days you had to get a long rest period to recover? And after you got up, it's not like you could jump into the driver's seat. There was a sleep inertia period where you had to be up and awake before you hit the road, right?
Well, there is. It's the government. It is flat numbers. You have to be stopped and logging a rest break after driving for any length of time you have to. In order to get a full work shift in, again, you have to be stopped and logging a rest break for 10 hours. Now, you can be doing push-ups for 10 hours. As long as you're not driving, the government says it's okay.
You were the one who brought up sleep inertia, and because it takes us a minute.
Yeah.
One of my self-defense gun stories was about someone who's just at a restaurant, and he sees one of the wait staff get attacked by a customer. I think they'd had a problem with this guy before. He pulls out a knife and backs this person up, and one of the customers in the restaurant says, "Ooh, knife versus unarmed person, innocent unarmed person. I'm not going to sit there and let this person get stabbed." So they presented their firearm and stopped the attacker. Everybody was already calling 911. Great. But what would you do? What would you do? You're a concealed carrier. This isn't in your home. This is in public. It's not an attack on you. It's an attack on a third party. Are you willing to get involved? And the answer often is, it depends. You know, is this a cowboy bar where there are fights happening every night and knife fights once a month?
And if it is, why are you there?
Why are you? Good point. Or is this, a 15-year-old hostess who just seats people and wipes tables, and now there's a guy going at her with a steak knife? Oh my goodness. Think of it now, because you would hate to make a conclusion 3 minutes after the event that you should have done something different.
Do you know what to say to people who are making that 911 phone call? Do you know what to say when the police get there that will help keep you out of jail? I'm not going to guarantee anything you say is going to keep you out of jail if you discharge your firearm. There's a good chance you're going to spend a night in jail, no matter what you say. So, and this, the reason, and you're a training junkie just like I am, Rob.
Friday.
I wanted to, that's why I wanted to bring you on today, is because we are going to, we got a comment from Tom Walls in here that'll fit just perfectly here. We don't rise to the level of our expectations. We fall to the level of our training. And Rob, you and I had a short discussion pre-show. You're not going to go anywhere you haven't been. The good news is you can think about a lot of things, and that programs your brain to say, I know what, I've been here before.
Let's describe it a little different way. You're looking to recognize a problem rather than think your way through it.
Yes.
And think about what you do as you drive. You go, oh, traffic could stop suddenly in front of me. My foot's off the gas. I recognize the problem. I don't sit there and do calculations of stopping distance. That was done a long time ago. the fascinating thing about what Tom had just put up is that gap between our expectations, perhaps, and our actual level of training. What have we asked our body to do? Let's put it to you this way. What have you demonstrated? And if you've demonstrated a skill, how's the shelf life on that doing? If I went to the range with a guy, yeah, they showed me a pistol when I was in the Army for 5 minutes. I qualified kind of 15 years ago, and he goes, I look at him and he just says, yeah, let's start over. How would you perform today?
Dude, that just smacked me right dead center right there. I was just
Why is that?
I was thinking as you started that, well, because I was going to come back with, can you hit a moving target while you're moving? That is the most difficult shot I've ever made in my life. And I did it at the Firearms Academy of Seattle, and I learned how to do it, and I became fairly efficient at it. Did I hit every single time? No, I did not. But I was able to get a good portion of my hits where I wanted them to go on a moving target as I was moving as well. Could I do that today? Well, that's been 5 years ago, and there's been a stroke between here and there.
Well, so that what would be great is if you can just get to any range where they'll let you move a little. At first, can you take a step and shoot? Can't even do that really in most square ranges. Okay, can I take a step, present, and then as I'm moving sideways, shoot again, even if the target's standing still? Great, half steps. Those things matter. Let's find out where those skills are. I'm not asking you to be John Wick. I'm asking you to know what you can do.
And that's what that active shooter interdiction course, at that point, I was absolutely positive of what I could do, what shots I can make.
Right.
Can I make a single-handed shot at 20 yards and strike dead center? You betcha I could. Can I do it now with my right hand? No, I'm pretty ding-dang sure I could.
Okay.
But
by the way, I struggle with my left hand, and I didn't have a stroke, so.
Well, my left hand, I don't know if I can make it at 5 yards, but my right hand, my dominant hand, I'm still good. I was lucky. My stroke was left side effective. So.
I want to go back to that article for just a second.
Yep.
There are lots of people who, they may not be part of the church security team. They carry a church as they go. It's just part of their life. In some churches, that's approved. In some, it's more of a don't ask, don't tell. As in, we don't want to know. Well, for a lot of churches, though, it's more formalized. Hey, if you're a volunteer in the nursery, you're taking care of a bunch of kids, we would like somebody there because given domestic disputes, hey, I'm going to go get my kid. And often that church nursery is a place where they know their children are located, and parents have tried to kidnap their own kids and take them away from their spouse. It's part of a domestic conflict. The courts usually get involved.
And it's a whole lot easier to get a kid out of a church than it is out of a school, usually. Okay. So you're part of the church security team just because you thought you were just taking care of kids, and they said, no, the job's bigger than that. How much different is that from somebody who's working in the administrative office of a school, and somebody, a stranger, doesn't sign in, doesn't identify themselves? Somebody's coming out of the school, they push through the door before it locks, and now all of a sudden you've got an intruder. Yeah.
They're actually pretty similar situations. So these armed school staff do a lot of the same things that we're likely to face just as ordinary citizens. And again, are you going to follow them if you're unarmed? Yeah, you are. Just like you don't have a gun, somebody breaks into your home, I'm still getting between them and my kids. Is a golf club better than nothing? Yeah, but they make tools for this. You don't have to improvise.
They do. And it's unfortunate that in a whole lot of schools, and honestly a whole lot of churches, depending on where your church fits politically, there may be barriers between you using those tools. A new thought just entered my head.
Okay.
I personally, and I'm not going to name names, I personally know somebody who works in an educational setting as a teacher, and they're in a non-permissive environment, and they do it anyway. They carry anyway. I would just rather there be a centralized approach from the school saying, look, we know that certain people are going to be our response team, and let's get them training. Let's let them practice. Let's let them do what they do so they're more effective. This person doesn't have access to that. They decide, look, if I believe the phrase was, if it's a choice between losing my job or losing some of my kids, I'll lose the job every time.
Lose the job. Yeah, which grabs my heart, Thank you. What was surprising, a story out of the FASTER group, I've often thought that medical training is sort of the gateway experience, because when people are plugging what look like holes in other human beings and their hands are getting bloody, they go, man, I'd do anything to keep from having to do this in my colleague, one of the kids, one of the parents. Oh my gosh, this would be horrible. And then they go, yeah, somebody should stop that so there are fewer holes to fill. Turns out a bunch of the medical trainees went to the school board and said, hey, this was great. Why aren't there armed defenders here? And the school board had to say, there are, but we don't talk about it. They took a don't ask, don't tell policy because they figured if they told the whole community, they didn't want to really, they weren't sure how it would turn out in the end if they had that debate, and they didn't want to lose. So they left it up to individual principals, and you're right, in some cases, even the emergency medical staff didn't know who was armed. So they were giving up a lot of the advantage because we need to have that political debate in our communities. Most parents want their kids protected.
Well, I do have a couple stories, Rob, I want to get into.
Let's go.
First up is a release from the Citizens Committee for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms. Starts off, the Citizens Committee for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms today applauded Oklahoma Congresswoman Stephanie Bice for requesting information from the Internal Revenue Service about weapons and accessories it has purchased in recent years, turning the tax agency into what appears to be a quasi-military operation. Representative Bryce sent a letter to IRS Commissioner Daniel Werfel inquiring about the accounts IRS used to purchase weapons, gear, and ammunition, and data on types of modifications to IRS issued weapons that have been approved. She asked for a reply within 5 business days. A couple quotes here from Alan Gottlieb. Congresswoman Bryce isn't the only one who wants answers. As we noted more than a month ago, the IRS has reportedly spent $2.3 million on ammunition, nearly $475,000 on Smith & Wesson rifles, another $463,000 for Beretta tactical shotguns, and $1.2 million on ballistic shields. We would like very much to know what's going on here, and so would our members. Last month, we supported Joni Ernst when she announced legislation to disarm the IRS, and we likewise support Representative Bice in her effort to get to the facts. The IRS has some explaining to do, and every time I read that, I practiced this a couple times ago, I hear that in Ricky Ricardo's voice. The IRS has some explaining to do.
Explaining to do, Lucy.
Yes. The IRS has some explaining to do, and so does the Biden administration, for a president who wants to restrict the gun rights of law-abiding American citizens. Biden sure seems keen on keeping the federal agencies armed to the teeth. I'm going to go ahead and leave the rest of it there. It's a popular term, but it's accurate. This is nothing more than the weaponization of the federal government. Each and every federal agency, down to the EPA, and why on earth would anybody in EPA and the FDA need to be armed? And yet they all are. And this is, I really want to know why they can't call for police backup from local authorities.
Well, now see that there, perfect. You hit it right on the head. Thank you, Paul. They do. They should. They used to. But watch now. Many of these government agencies have been politicized against the Biden administration's political opponents. Suddenly, the sheriff's deputies might not be reliable thugs for you when you're doing that. Hey, we need to break into this guy's house and toss the place. Really? Just like we now have ATF, if you try and sue the BATFE, you're going to get an audit. They may come in and disrupt your business, if not your home.
Yep.
That stinks.
And if the ATF, and I can understand the ATF agents being armed, I really can. But
Why?
if they, well, hang on with me for a second.
Okay, sure.
I'll go with, standard police sidearms, because they,
All right.
Look, but if the ATF can't do it, they bring the IRS in to confiscate what they're not allowed to. And that's part of what's concerning. There was a case, I want to say it was Wyoming, the ATF was going to raid an FFL.
Right.
And the ATF is not allowed to take the bound book. IRS doesn't have that restriction. So they brought the IRS along, and the IRS took the bound book. The IRS can take any documents they deem to be relevant to taxes. And the whole thing about arming the IRS is we've had issues in Ruby Ridge, Waco, and more with the ATF and a bungling agency. Why do we want that with the IRS as well?
Right. Here's what bothers me most. We want the trust of the American people. What was it, the gal from Breitbart who said, I'm sorry, Rob, that ship sailed. Most Americans no longer trust their federal government. If you have to ask, if you want to ask a question to figure out where somebody stands politically, there are two questions you ask. Do you support wearing masks, and do you, due to illnesses and transmission of illnesses and colds, and do you support the government agencies being armed? That separates us left from right faster than any other question.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't invent that Occam's razor. I don't like it, but those are the politics we have today.
Yeah, I can absolutely see FBI agents being armed. I can absolutely,
Right.
I can see, and I can see ATF agents to a point being armed. I don't want, let's just say they're allowed to be armed with what I'm allowed to be armed with, without
Well,
the tax stamp.
I used to work for a defense contractor. It drove me a little crazy when I said, we're taking machine guns out to the desert to fire them. We aren't allowed sidearms to defend the... I was afraid we were going to get robbed and the thugs would steal machine guns. They wouldn't let us go armed. It was crazy.
Oh, wow. And
But so, in the sense that should the ATF be armed? Yeah, if you're taking someone's firearms collection, I want that protected so the local thugs don't roll over the ATF agents and steal my gun collection until I can get it back.
Yeah, absolutely. And, well, I got one more story that we got 5 minutes. I got one more story I really want to
Jump
get
in.
to. Mike Bloomberg gun control affiliated Shannon Watts is trying to pressure the Grand Ole Opry into preventing Jason Aldean from headlining an August fundraiser organized to raise money for the families and community of the Covenant Christian School, where 3 children and 3 adults were slain on March 27, 2023. Watts expressed her desire to prevent Aldean from headlining the fundraiser for the Christian families and communities shortly after Aldean's music video for Try That in a Small Town was pulled by CMT. Breitbart News reported that CMT removed the video earlier this week. Watts responded by taking credit for CMT's decision, tweeting, "Proud to have had a hand in getting CMT to reject this racist and violent song." Watts then targeted the plan to have Aldean headline the upcoming fundraiser, tweeting, "The Grand Ole Opry is hosting Jason Aldean at a fundraiser for the Covenant School in Nashville. One would think there are many other country music artists they could invite instead." Breitbart News noted that one of Watts' earliest reaction to Try That in a Small Town video was to claim that the song was about how Aldean and his friends will shoot you if you try to take their guns. Well, that's not in the song, and it's not implied in the video. My issue here is I'm trying to find if the Grand Ole Opry invited and had I'm just gonna pull a liberal off my backside here. If they invited what's her name, the Babs, Barbara Streisand, to come in and headline a fundraiser for those families, I don't care. I don't if those families and those victims are going to get money, good. Why does it matter the political affiliation of the people that are trying to help that?
Because Shannon Watts wants to make it expensive for people who defend traditional values to speak out.
So she wants the victims to get less money.
She doesn't care. She's got enough money. She's got Bloomberg's billions. And what I find interesting is I can understand that you can maybe get bribed if you're management in the Grand Ole Opry, but they're going to damage their reputation for generations if they pull Aldean. Because everybody will go, "You're playing woke with us. We can Bud Light you too."
Yeah, and honestly, this is just about Aldean. And I'm going to be absolutely clear. I remember you and I had it was the final night of Gun Rights Policy Conference. We were in Dallas, and I'd woke up Sunday morning or Monday morning, was just getting ready to leave, and we found out that there had been a shooting in Las Vegas at a country music festival.
Right.
A bunch of people were hurt and a bunch of people died. And Jason Aldean came out right after that. Jason Aldean was, if he wasn't on stage, he was performing that day, but I don't think he was on stage when the shooting started. I could be wrong. Either way, he came out with a decidedly, it's too easy to get guns. And, you know, I gotta say, this is kind of a surprising song to come from him. He's not the songwriter, but I think this is just a play from his management staff to say, look, you need to get in with country music fans who are red-blooded Americans who generally are on the side of the Second Amendment. So here's the song we want you to record. And he's like, I like money, so okay.
Right. Yeah. He's massaging his position in the public in the public's eye. That's fascinating. We thought at one point that instant communication would let us speak. Now we find our speech being edited by that algorithm on Facebook, on YouTube. We may need another. Well, people have started alternative outlets to speak.
We're on Rumble right now.
A dozen of them, right? And it reminds us that, maybe if you want to talk to your friends, you better have some backup, because we're all one step away from saying something wrong and we end up in social media jail for a month.
Let me, this going back to what Shannon Watt's intention was, let me get this in from C&T Designs and Arms. Because with the left, it is about the narrative, no matter who they hurt. And he hits it dead on the nail on the head there.
I agree.
So, Rob, we're down past the bottom of the hour. Still a couple more stories, but I'll get to those tomorrow. If we would, and I have to do this when you're on, will you plug self-defense gun stories and anything else you want to promote today, man?
Well, as you see, Paul and I can talk for a half hour with ease. When we're on the Polite Society podcast, there are three of us. We run an hour and a half. Can't get us to be quiet. My little snack food of a podcast is called Self-Defense Gun Stories. I think the last one was 18 minutes. I try and keep it right around 20. That comes out once a week. I've got 2,100 articles on the Slow Facts blog for you to look at. Paul, thank you so much for giving me a shout.
Thank you, man, for coming on. I really did want to have an in-depth talk about that article. And let me go ahead and real quick, I'm going to grab this. I'm going to grab the URL for that article. And I'm going to put it in the chat for both Facebook and YouTube.
Oh, thank you.
So
there'll be probably another 5 or 6 articles that come out about this training event.
Very cool. All right. Well, that's going to do it for us today. I've got one more show to do this week, and I'm going to do it solo tomorrow. At least at this point, I intend on doing it solo tomorrow. And then Thursday, Friday, I'm traveling to Detroit. Expect a lot of stuff to come live out of Detroit. Rob's going to be there. I'm going to be there. Amanda Suffolk is going to be there. A lot of folks that are in the training industry are going to be there. Really looking forward to it, and I hope to give you a lot of content while we're there. So that's going to do it for us today, folks. Thanks again for watching. Podcast listeners, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.